This story is told from an 18-year-old French female's perspective. The story I'm about to tell happened to me almost 2 years ago. A friend of mine, her younger sister, and I had decided to go shopping one afternoon. My friend's mother was nice enough to drop us off at the mall since we were all too young to drive at the time. She said she would pick us up around 6 p.m. and that she would text us where she'd park so that we could meet her. At 6:12, my friend received a text that her mom was waiting for us in her car in the underground parking lot. She then gave us the lot number so that we could find her. It might sound careless for 3 girls to roam around an underground parking lot on their own, but we knew the place well and it wasn't the first time we had to walk through it. My friend and I were in the middle of having coffee when she received the text, and her sister was making a big fuss because she was tired and really wanted to go home. My friend finished her coffee and we didn't want her sister to cause a scene, so I told her it was fine and for them to go and that I would join them in a few minutes. After I finished drinking my coffee and paid the bill, I headed for the parking lot. I should say that this happened in winter, so it was already dark outside and, of course, so was the underground parking lot. In addition, it was also late, so the place was completely deserted. However, I knew my friend's mother's car was less than 250 meters away, so it wasn't a long walk. After a few seconds of walking, I heard footsteps getting closer and felt like someone was behind me. I know that underground parking lots are not the safest place to be, especially for a girl, but I decided to stay calm and walked over to a car as if it were my own, thinking that whoever was behind me would walk away. Still, I pulled out my phone and pretended like I was texting when, in fact, I used my phone to take a picture of who was behind me in the reflection of the car window. The picture will be on screen right now. I didn't have enough time to react though when I felt a hand grab around my wrist and pull me to the side. I was thrown down on the hood of the car. I knocked the side of my head in the process and my vision was blurry for a few seconds. I had a metallic taste inside of my mouth, and I later found out that with the blow, my teeth had cut inside of my cheek and also split my bottom lip. When I came to my senses, I felt a pair of gloved hands sliding up my calves to my thighs. I've never been in such a scary situation before, and I was way too shocked to scream. Now, I haven't mentioned it before, but my father insisted a few months prior that I take self-defense lessons, which I did. So I took a deep breath and repeated in my head, "Don't panic," like a mantra. The guy probably thought he'd knocked me out cold since he wasn't paying much attention to my upper body. I thought about my bunch of keys inside of my jacket. I slowly grabbed it inside my pocket and, like I'd learned, fisted my hand with the keys held in between each of my fingers. Then I quickly pulled my fist out and hit the side of the man's face as hard as I could with it. Unfortunately, it wasn't enough to knock him out. The guy had his hood up, covering most of his face, and like I said, it was pretty dark, but I could see that this guy was pretty bulky and obviously stronger than I was. He cursed and pulled a fucking switchblade out of his rear pocket. I really started to panic then. Now, I don't know if it's the adrenaline that made me move fast enough, but I immediately put my arm up to block the blow. However, because I was shaking so badly, I didn't manage to block his arm like I wanted to, and the knife cut through the skin of my arm before flying away. Anger took over fear, and I could honestly feel rage boiling inside of my veins. I tried to kick the guy with my feet, but he had a firm hold on both of my ankles, keeping my legs spread. I was screaming now and struggling as best as I could, trying to scratch the man's face with my nails. Finally, he let go of one of my legs to pin down my wrist. I saw my chance and I took it. I kicked the guy with my free leg, aiming for his kneecap. The guy screamed in pain and fell on his knees. I slid off the hood of the car and punched the guy in the throat. I quickly grabbed my phone, which fell when the guy threw me on top of the car, and ran as fast as I could without looking back towards my friend's mother's car. My friend got out of the car when she saw me and asked what the hell had taken me so long. Obviously, they hadn't heard the screams or seen anything. She stopped yelling when she realized that something was wrong with me. She asked me why I was shaking like a leaf and told me that I looked really pale. And then she grew pale herself when she pointed out the blood running down my arm and my mouth. Her mother got out at that point, and I bent over and threw up against the wheel of the car. They then drove me to the nearest hospital. I didn't say a word during the drive, probably because I was too shocked to say anything. I later reported what happened to the police, but they never found the guy. My photo and the videotapes from the security cameras were useless since we couldn't see the man's face on either of them. I'm now terrified of underground garages, and for some weird reason, I never go out alone without having my set of keys firmly in hand. I still have nightmares about that guy, and what upsets me the most, strangely, is that I'll never be able to put a face on the man that haunts my dreams. A few summers ago, just before the start of my junior year in college, I decided to take a trip to San Francisco. Since I attended my home state's flagship university, I really needed a brief change of scenery. I've always wanted to be in California, which was convenient as one of my friends was interning in San Francisco and offered to let me stay with her. All the details were eventually worked out and I was so excited to go. My friend was still interning while I visited, so she wasn't able to show me around too much, but I had a blast exploring on my own. I spent the majority of my time reading at different parks and taking pictures. She got off work at around 5, so I would head back around then to hang out with her. I always knew I was close to hers when I saw the construction. It was a huge project that required pedestrians to navigate through tunnels. I had been through them many times before, but on that particular day, someone ran up next to me right as we entered the dimly lit passage. He was a larger guy, wearing a white wife beater and blue jeans. I'm usually pretty friendly, but something felt off about him. We awkwardly exchanged heys before I quickened my pace, expecting him to just drift away. But he changed his pace to match mine and kept lingering. "So, what's your name?" he asked. "None of your business," I responded without looking at him, hoping he'd get the hint. He didn't. "Hey, you're really pretty. Do you want to go to a party?" But before even giving me time to respond, he grabbed my arm. He was pulling me towards the end of the tunnel. I had no idea what awaited me there. His grip was incredibly tight and he was so much bigger than me there was no way I could escape by strength alone. Despite being a very tiny person, I didn't have any pepper spray or any self-defense skills. I had never felt so vulnerable in my entire life. My mind was trying to find a way to survive, but then I felt someone else pull my other arm from behind. I thought it was all over, but I looked back and saw that it was a woman around my mom's age, dressed in business attire. Needless to say, I was very confused.
"Hey, it's really you. I haven't seen you in so long,"
she said as she started sprinting towards the way she came from and pulled me with her. I let out a sigh of relief as I felt his grip loosen. I was ecstatic to exit the tunnel, and when I looked back, he was gone. She told me that she saw the guy go after me and knew that something was wrong. She walked the remaining block with me to my friend's place. I thanked her for everything and we hugged before I hurried to tell my friend what had just happened. We never even got to exchange names, but I don't know what I would have done without her. It warms my heart to know that there are people out there who have the courage to help others. I actually recently moved to San Francisco and the construction at the site of the incident has been completed. Even so, I think of her every time I pass by. Okay, so I'm a member of the slam poetry scene. Basically, it's an excuse to get people to listen to performance poetry by adding a competitive element to things. After running through this small scene in my city and wanting to branch out and push my career further, I started visiting places within driving distance that I could go to. This eventually led me to Charlotte, North Carolina. I started at their local team venue where you would compete to be part of a squad that goes to a national competition every year. I was doing really well and was accepted into the local crew pretty quickly. This led to longer stays and features at some of the other venues in the city. I started going to one that was particularly popular and really good for selling CDs, and that's where I met him. He slowly started flirting with me more and more. Although in my loose days, searching for acceptance and love everywhere, something always kept me leery. I would gladly accept the drinks he sent over, smoke his weed with the group in the stock room between sets, and hang out at parties and events. I always had the tickle in my gut warning me not to get close, but over a year or two we continued to become friends. After a while, he started calling and texting me more often. poking me on Facebook daily, sending messages about wanting to be more than friends and that he wanted to find a, quote, snow bunny. Yes, I'm white and he's black, settle down. Again, I never entertained the idea. There was always something gnawing at me. The crazy in his eyes was too hard to miss. I eventually moved to Denver to take a position teaching poetry and to work at a friend's law firm. The second Christmas I was there, I got the call. A friend from Charlotte, North Carolina relayed the following. He had found his white girl and gotten married. They seemed happy at first, but slowly began fighting more and more. It spilled over into the venue, and often they had to be separated by friends from physically attacking one another in public. One friend, later thinking back, remembers the last time she saw them together. Him pushing his wife, followed by her throwing a drink in his face and scratching his neck deep enough to draw blood. My friend told me that after the couple had been dragged away from each other, she sat with him and smoked a cigarette. She said she laughed and jokingly said that you guys are going to kill each other someday. Around Christmas last year, his wife just stopped coming to the bi-weekly events that they both attended regularly. He explained it casually that they were just on a break. Time goes by, no one really questions why they haven't seen or heard from her in a while, thinking maybe she was breaking from the whole scene in order to put distance between herself and her husband. Her parents, however, hadn't heard from their daughter since Thanksgiving dinner. They would call him and he would say everything was fine and just blow them off. This continues until a week after Christmas, knowing their daughter would never miss a holiday without at least one call. So they call the police and send them to the couple's home for a well-body check. The cops arrive, knock on the door, and they're let in. They ask him where she is, and he replies that she's in the bedroom. He shows them to the room, and there she lay, dead for weeks, rotting in their bed. Oh, and he killed their little dog, too. During this time, he had been attending events, hosting hip-hop nights, even publishing a blog on making a marriage work on one of the local organization's websites. Never once letting on that every night he was going home and sleeping with his murdered wife. The sickest part of all, he has a child from another relationship, a daughter who he gets to celebrate every other holiday with. That Christmas, they opened gifts, had dinner, cuddled up on the couch, and watched movies less than 100 feet from her decaying stepmother. I don't know what would have happened if I'd ever taken him up on his offer to date, but I do know that me and my gut are going to stay on speaking terms, and I will always, always listen.